بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Okay, so today I was going to do a question and answer, open question and answer session, because we had 3 weeks of actually a particular talk. So yeah, I feel like just let's leave it open to question and answers on any subject, inshallah. So whilst you think, I will take a rest. Bismillah, questions, and hopefully the sisters, they can write down their questions on a paper, and Brother Shafi will be up to collect them or to somehow get them downstairs, inshallah. So any questions, and let's see what we can do on the issues, inshallah. Who's going to start the ball rolling? Or are you like me? Normally, when some of the ulama come in, I know I'm going to meet this alim, so I've got these questions prepared. And by the time you get there, you can't forget all your questions.
Do you want to talk about a particular subject or specific area?
Anything. If I can answer it sensibly, then I will do. If I can't answer it, wallahu alam. If I don't want to answer it, then same thing. Let's kick off.
We are planning, like next year. I was hoping to talk to you tonight after the class. Is there a possibility we can arrange a 1-2 hours course before Ramadan? Might be next weekend. On yourself and another sheikh on the Ramadan.
Okay.
Very
yeah.
Basic mas'ala.
Absolutely.
Everything.
Yeah. That's important to do, to arrange some kind of basic Ramadan instruction and spiritual reminder. Ramadan instruction is important because we need to know the basic rules, ahkam of Ramadan, and Ramadan spiritual reminder, so that we actually understand what the actual greater goal of fasting is. When it comes to the Ramadan instructions on rules and regulations, of course there are going to be some slight differences between the madhahib, between the schools of law. But generally, there's the bulk of the matter is more or less agreed upon, and then just a few of the finer details are differed on. So in that case, it would be good if we can get someone who's kind of entrenched in the fiqh of the majority of people, which is Hanafi fiqh. That would be good if we can get. Yeah, that would be good, inshallah. And we can do that. That's really important, inshallah, because we need to know the Messiah or the ahkam of Ramadan before we actually start the month of Ramadan. And we can't be kind of making things up as we go along. We need to be clear, if we're, say, for example, an asthmatic, can I use, let's say, a mildly asthmatic, as opposed to really deeply asthmatic, because then one shouldn't be fasting at all. But can I use a spray pump, an inhaler pump, during fasting? Does that break the fast or not? I need to know. And it's not that I need to, I know all the evidences and all the opinions. No, I just need to know practically what opinion should I follow, period. Does it break the fast because it's something that enters so-called beyond the throat and therefore slightly down the throat, and anything that enters beyond the throat could break or spoil the fast? Or is it something that, no, actually doesn't enter beyond the throat, all it does is widens up the air passage through some very fine spray? What is it? I need to know. Do I need to make the niyyah, intention of the fast, let's say 30 days fast? Will one intention at the beginning of Ramadan suffice the whole 30 days fasting? That, look, this is the month of Ramadan, however many days there are in this Ramadan, I intend to fast all of them? Or do I have to make specific fasts, a specific intention for every fast in the night time before during suhoor time, for example? So I need to know these because there is a few differences, and they are really important parts of understanding and establishing fasts. And then, of course, knowing the spiritual matters, which is the greater goal. And then just 1 or 2 other issues that could be cleared up. That would be a good idea, I think, inshallah. I mean, one could kind of, I suppose, alternatively, just go to their sheikh or go online or read a decent book about fasting, and within about 5-10 minutes, the whole thing could be cleared up. I suspect. I imagine that could be so. Any other questions? Bronze. Let's Sorry.
So I was scratching my head.
All right, okay. That's not much of
I'm in secondary, yeah, and in one of the subjects, RE,
yeah.
we were learning about women rights in Islam. And the point that the teacher made was why women were not allowed to lead Salah in Islam. So if you could like expand on that.
Why women can't lead the Salah, the prayer, in Islam. That is to say, why women can't be imams for prayer, like men can and do in Islam. The answer is very simple. It's because the Prophet ﷺ made those type of functions, leading the prayer, giving the khutbah, leading Eid prayers, and other such matters. He made that the prerogative of men, not because every man is more pious than every woman. It's just a social function which men should do, and that is the norm. That's all it is. It's in the Sunnah, it's established like that. But when that question is asked, quite often by non-Muslims, they have certain understandings or follow-up issues in mind. It will occur to many non-Muslims, well, if a woman can't lead the prayer, that means she's always got an inferior status than a man. Leading the prayer is quite an important thing as far as many non-Muslims go. But most of us Muslims know that actually leading the prayer, it's important. But actually, let's just say the imam didn't turn up. Okay? Let's say there was no scholar or sheikh or learned person in the building. Then we know that any one of us could actually lead the prayer. As long as you could, let's just say it's a loud prayer like Maghrib, as long as you could recite Fatiha decently and a surah, and you just kind of knew how to pray, you could lead the prayer. Okay? A 12-year-old could lead the prayer, technically. So being an imam to lead the prayer doesn't always mean that that person is the highest level of scholarship or is the most learned in the community. The question to ask is, can women, Muslim women, become scholars? Become learned religious authorities from whom religion and fatwa is sought? And the answer clearly is yes, they can. And yes, they can, and some of them do. We used to have more female scholars in the past than we do now. And we are actually at the point since the 10th century of Islam, since, let's say, the last 400 years, okay, since the 16th century of the Common Era. When we look in the books of tabaqat, of the dictionaries of scholars, names of scholars, okay, and there are works on who are the scholars, and you open up the scholars' books of tabaqat of early Islam, we'll see thousands and thousands of names of men, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of names of women. And then that's in the early days of Islam. By the time of the 6th or 7th Islamic century, when it was reaching its kind of golden age in terms of Islamic knowledge, even more thousands and thousands of names of Islam, of men, and quite a lot of hundreds and hundreds of names of women. But by the time we get to the 10th Islamic century, the 16th century of the Common Era, the number drops rapidly. And there aren't as many female scholars. By the time the 17th and 18th century come, number of female scholars are very, very, very small. Until we come today, whereby the number of female scholars, I'm talking about really, decently well-seasoned scholars, not a sister or a brother who's done 7 years in a Darul Uloom or whatever, and they are a scholar or an alim. I'm talking about some, decent level of scholarship. It's almost dropped, which is something that we need to look at, understand why it's happened, and reverse the situation. So they can't lead the prayer. Then there are practical issues about that if there was, this is a secondary issue, not the main issue. But if a woman was the regular imam, but there are times that she won't pray. Okay, and she can't pray. So there are all these kinds, and for most of human history, and this is really important to understand, most of human history, including in this society, in most of human history, it wasn't the norm for women to be in the public sphere at that level all the time. The idea of women coming out in the public space, working regularly, just being around and whatever, as opposed to either being at home or working in the locality, sowing, farming, whatever it be, it was a rarity. And so we have those kind of functions for the whole of human history. So women can't be in Islam simply because the Prophet ﷺ taught us that men fulfill the role of being an imam. The only issue is, what can a woman lead the prayer privately when it's a non-obligatory prayer like Taraweeh? There is a scholarly difference because of what the Prophet ﷺ said to one Sahabiya, one female Sahabi, one female companion, in one hadith. He says that you lead your household in prayer. This was for Taraweeh, or for the night prayer, because she was more learned. And scholars differ. Did she lead her household in prayer, including the men of the house? Or did her household only include women? This is for a non-obligatory prayer done at home. And the scholars differ. Some scholars say no, she led the prayer at home, standing at the back. That's the lines, how the lines are. And she recited from the Quran. She recited the Quran, and she led the women, the whole small group of numbers, 7, 8 people, including some male slaves and workers in the house, and she led them in prayer. Others say, yes, she led them in prayer, but there was no males. And therefore, you have that scholarly difference, that yes, it's allowed for a woman, in the case of like Taraweeh prayer, to lead the men of the house, whom she is a mahram to, such as a son, or someone that she can't, actually marry. And she could lead them in that. And some scholars say no, because of the text. Otherwise, the normal prayer, the answer is no. And my advice is that where it's possible, some of these issues we should try to not delve too much into with non-Muslims, simply because when someone doesn't understand, for example, the nature of Allah, God, and our relationship with Allah, and what we've been put here on earth for, as a test and as a way to connect to Allah, then the details become less relevant. When someone doesn't have a conviction, a yaqeen in the Quran being the word of God, and the Prophet ﷺ being the perfect role model and final messenger of God, then some of the details is, well, why should you bother? Especially in a day and age in which, and it's only been like this for a short time, 30, 40, 50 years, that actually everything must be equal. And then when you question that, well, what do you mean by equality? They mean everything should be equal. But that's, if you mean that every man and woman should meet the law at the same level, that means if a man does a crime, then he should be equally punished as if the woman did the same crime. If you mean equal in the sense that everyone should have equal job opportunities, we don't say, oh, this person is a woman, we won't take them. No, does she have the qualifications for that particular job? And that's fine, absolutely, we should have that. Okay. But does it mean that men and women are equal, just equal? No sensible person will say that if they think about the question. Women excel men sometimes in certain things, and vice versa. The physiology of men, the way that we are made up physically, is different. There are so many things that men and women share, and a few things that are distinct. That's simply how Islam sees things. It appreciates gender differences, and this world and society is going out of the way to, for some good reasons, for some confused reasons, almost obliterate gender differences and distinctions. So my advice is, even in schools and whatever, very nice, but just keep it simple. And why should a teacher understand the nature of who leads the prayer and who doesn't? And quite often these things are used to normally put down the religion. And the greater challenge, from my experience, okay, the greatest challenge is if you say to a person, well, actually, if you want to understand the religion of Islam, let's discuss it from the revelation itself, and let's see what faults and what issues you can find in revelation. And what tends to happen is people don't find faults, people find likes and dislikes. Oh, that must, like, so for example, a big issue in the West is the marriage of the marriage of the Prophet to the lady Aisha, and the marriage was contracted according to Hadith Sahih Bukhari when she was 6 years old. They signed on the dotted line, so to speak. And then by the time she was 9, she came from Mecca to Medina, because the Prophet was then in Medina, and she was with him as wife. Leaving alone non-Muslims, even us Muslims, 9 years old. I doubt if there's anyone in the room who have children would even contemplate their daughters getting married at 9. Why? Because the norms of society that you don't even think about, you just feel that, even if your daughter is 14 or 15, you think, oh, she's still young. Okay, but here's 9 years old. And then what happens is, this happened, like when I was in America, this happened a lot. So many of the American Muslims had a problem with this. They said, oh, our deen is good and whatever, but hey, what do you say about, how can we explain that? And I said, why do you need to explain it? It happened. What you need to ask the question is, was it strange? Was it against the norm of those times and that society? In fact, you need to ask the question, marrying a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old or an 11-year-old, was it strange in any society at that time? Muslim or non-Muslim society? And then I just simply mentioned that, by 1880, in the Western world, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, France, Holland, Britain, many states of the United States of America, there's enough data by 1880 and enough laws written and documented to know what the minimum age of marriage was in the countries, including our country, in 1880. In France, in 1880, the marital age was around about 12. As long as a woman was 12, in 1880 she could get married. In some of the states of the United States of America, the age was 10. In one state, the age was 8. 1880. Okay. Just less than 150 years ago, let's say 160 years ago. And it wasn't a big issue. And even before that, maybe the ages were even younger. Islam simply sees that if a woman is ready to conceive, and generally in the old days, she would be psychologically prepared to understand what it means to conceive and look after a child and a husband or a house. That's how it would have been in the old days. Which is why all the attacks on the Prophet we find non-Muslims doing, he's a liar, he's a poet, he's a madman, he's a this, he's a that, or from the few of the Christian critics that we have at that time, he's just kind of changed the religion of Christianity and made it, slightly tweaked it, and he's come out with his own. No one ever said anything about the Prophet's marriage to Aisha, because it was quite normal that it could happen. Okay. Now, is that the norm here? Absolutely not. Is that the sunnah? Absolutely not the sunnah. Is it halal? Yes. When you're in that type of environment, raising that type of society, in that situation, absolutely. 9-year-old girls today, 9-year-old boys, they're just kids. They're really just kids. In fact, you get 21-year-old girls and boys, and they're just still kids. They barely know. Biologically, they've moved into that transition of being young man and young woman. Absolutely, biologically. Everything is ticking as it should be. But their mentality, they're just kids. Okay? They're kids. I mean, I'm not saying necessarily 21, but, you know, definitely. My point in this is, we Muslims, because we don't read, because our intellectual levels, we've dragged ourselves so low. Okay? I'm not talking about because I didn't get some qualification at school. I'm talking about even our doctors and our lawyers and our engineers and our professionals. Because as a whole, the intellectual level of the ummah has so become stunted, we're always arguing silly things. And we don't have the ability to have strong arguments without always feeling that we're on the back foot. Okay? But the more we read, and the more our knowledge is certain of the deen and of life and society itself, the less we have these problems. And that long answer came because non-Muslims have clearly some objections, and we should sit down and try to entertain some of them. But beyond a certain point, you know what, it's more important that you understand where it's all coming from. Why is it like that? Why does it have to be, well, because the Prophet said, because he's the messenger of God. And unlike your understanding of, say, maybe Christianity, not all Christians have the same understanding, but let's just say, then as far as many Christians are concerned, you have a book, the Bible, and you have your own understanding and explanations. For us, absolutely not. We have the book, the Quran, and we don't have our own understanding and explanations. We have the Prophet ﷺ living out the Quran and living with people for 23 years, ﷺ, teaching us what the details of the Quran actually mean in his practical life. And why do we do this? Because the Quran itself says, Ati'u Allah wa Ati'u Rasul, obey Allah and obey the Messenger. The Quran itself says that he is the example to follow. So then he becomes our example, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And he then says, look, the Quran says, Aqimus Salah, establish a prayer, and then he stands up on the minbar, the pulpit one day, and he stands up and he does the outward form of prayer. And he said, Sallu kama ra'aytumuni salli, pray as you've seen me pray. And he did all the movements. And those movements were taught to him by Jibreel alayhi salam in an early episode in Makkah. Oh, now I get it. That here's the Quran. Otherwise, most people think, most non-Muslims probably think, well, the Quran is there. Why is everyone doing this? Why can't it be done like that? Well, because we have to see what the Prophet did, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If they don't get that, they don't get many things. And we haven't had a chance or an opportunity to explain that to them. Okay, and that's a huge difference. Why can't we say, for example, well, look, the Quran says somewhere in the Quran, there's a verse that says that people should dress modestly. Well, modesty, let's say for a lady, immodesty would be wearing something very tight and very short. Modesty would be wearing something like a 1970s lengthy, full-length skirt, like the hippie people used to wear, with a long shirt, okay, nicely buttoned up at a decent thing. Yeah, that's modest. But actually, the Quran says, dress modestly, and then in other places of the Quran, the same Quran gives the details of what modesty is. And for a Muslim woman, modesty is encapsulated specifically in the verses, لا يبدين زينتهن إلا ما ظهر منها, and that a woman should not reveal of their beauty except that which ordinarily appears. And the Prophet said that when a woman reaches the age of maturity, nothing of her should be seen, of her body should be seen, except this and this. And he pointed to his, to the hands and to the face. Okay? But we are now in a situation, my brothers and sisters, whereby, because we've become quite detached from the religious foundations, now anybody can come up, and as long as he or she looks the part and sounds good and seems sincere, then, and they come out with any rule of Islam, especially if it agrees already with my own inclinations and thinking, yeah, that's Islam. So now you get someone who says, oh, the hijab, the actual scarf bit of a woman is not an obligation because, oh, there's a verse in there. So, oh yeah, well, he's a sheikh. Oh, really? How? How do you know what? Because of what? Absolutely not. And even if he was a sheikh, and this sheikh is having a bad day, because he said something which is absolutely and categorically haram. And if we're not careful, we may end up worshipping our sheikhs. How do we worship our sheikhs? Adi ibn Hatim, who used to be a Christian before he became a Muslim, he once heard the Prophet reciting some verses from Surah Tawbah. They, the Jews and the Christians, have taken their priests and their rabbis as lords besides Allah. And Adi, who was a Christian at that time, said, but we don't worship our priests and our rabbis. Or he said, the Christians don't worship their priests and rabbis. So he could have been a Muslim at that time, Allah, because he did say, Ya Rasulullah. So he said, they don't worship their priests and their rabbis. So the Prophet said, when their priests and rabbis declare something to be halal, lawful, don't the people believe it as lawful? He said, yes. And when their priests and their rabbis declare something to be haram, unlawful, don't the people consider it to be unlawful? He said, yes. Then the Prophet said, that is their worship of them. Meaning, when the priests and the rabbis say something is haram, even though that the people know that in their scripture it's halal, or the other way, when the priests and the rabbis say something is halal, even though the people know that in their scripture it's clearly haram, and they believe and they follow their priests and their rabbis, then they have made their priests and their rabbis to be authorities in law above, as far as they're concerned, God himself, because they believe God wrote the scriptures. If any one of us who knows drinking is haram in the Quran, who knows adultery is haram in the Quran, who knows that Islam says 5 times a prayer, 5 times a day prayer is an obligation, and then some sheikh comes in, let's just say his beard is there, his turban looks perfect, and he fits the, and he says, actually, because we live in Britain, we only have to pray 2 times a day. And actually, because British society is really, a drinking society, then at least once a month you should go out with your non-Muslim friends into the pub and drink a pint. And we think, yeah, that makes sense. And then he explained, and if we know, and what Muslim doesn't know that these things are haram, and we accept it from him, we have made that, we have then worshipped him besides Allah. Not in the sense that we've done sajda to him, absolutely not. Not in the sense we believe he's God, or any part of God, but that Allah being ahkamul hakimin, Allah being the best of judges, and he's given judgments in the Quran, we have given the judgment of someone else priority over the judgment of Allah, and therefore that's a form of shirk. So that we need to be careful of those things, which is why just learn the religion properly, understand the society we live in, and the rest of it has to be patience. Patience, why? Because we're in an age in which traditional values, even traditional Christian values, are being attacked. Sometimes sincerely, sometimes not. But they are being attacked. And so our way of life, following what the teachings of the Prophet is an ancient way of life, livable today, but a way of life that modern liberal societies want to change and destroy. They don't mind whether you're Sunni or Shia, unless it's a political issue, which is going to involve, whether ships can go through the Straits of Aden and the oil can get to us or not. Then it becomes a big issue, whether it's Shia, Sunni, Shia, linked to Iran, linked to Saudi Arabia, or whatever. But otherwise, they don't really care whether you're Sunni or Shia. They don't really care what you believe about Ali radiallahu anhu or not. They don't care about this. And they don't really not don't care whether you're Salafi or Ash'ari or Salafi or Sufi. What they do care about is, will you shake hands with a woman? Will you allow your son to go out with another boy? Or your daughter with another girl? Do you accept that people of the same sex can get married? Okay. Are you totally comfortable with the fact that interest, riba, is the cornerstone of the economy today and will continue to be? Those things, because if you don't agree with it, you don't agree with foundation liberal values. Now, I'm not saying go in the street and proclaim these values and get yourself in big trouble. Just I'm saying that at least know which way the wind is blowing from. Know which way the storm is coming in from. No good thinking, oh, it's coming in from the southeast, and look there and it hits you from behind. Poof. Okay, so bear that in mind, inshallah. Just remember the Prophet did say, and there is no reason to believe that we aren't getting closer to those times, that there will come a time where holding on to the deen will be like holding on to burning hot coal. If you pick up a burning hot coal, an ember of gold, you can't do that, just drop it, it's too hot. And the Prophet said, holding on to the religion will be like that. Which is why we need our scholars to be wiser, wiser and more courageous, more wisdom, and to remind us about the virtues of patience and establishing your connection with God before it becomes really difficult. And for the rest of us, we need to just be connected with the ulama, especially those ulama who have that spiritual quality, that ruhani quality, because then they see with a level of depth that the ordinary person doesn't see or understand. Okay, and we should mind the hotheads, and we should be careful how much and how little we take on the internet, and not always feel that I have to explain everything to non-Muslims. It's worth prioritizing what we explain, and if we can explain, great. If we don't explain, leave it to those who can, or just ask Allah for safety. Okay. And if you don't feel it now, either you're insulated or either Allah's blessed you, right? But the children will feel it. That's really my kind of advice. Maybe some things in there is a little bit exaggerated, but I think that's generally the way. Let me read this question, which I rolled up and almost illegible. Gives me a chance to make up my own version. Okay, let's see what this says. Sorry about this question. Brother Sheffield, did you do this on purpose with pink paper for the sisters and blue for the brothers? Okay, question. Are we allowed to pray Tahiyatul Masjid after Asr Namaz? According to the majority of the ulama, well, let's Tahiyatul Masjid. Tahiyatul Masjid, the Prophet said in the hadith in Sahih Bukhari, إِذَا دَخَلَ أَحَدَكُمُ الْمَسْجِدِ فَلَا يَجْلِسْ حَتَّى يُصَلِّيَ رَكْعَتَيْنِ. When anyone comes to the mosque, let him not sit down until he prays two rak'ahs. These two rak'ahs are just a way of greeting and honouring the masjid, and so they are called Tahiyatul Masjid, the prayer of greeting the mosque. The vast majority of scholars, in fact, in the four schools, I don't know of any difference, consider this to be a sunnah. Some say sunnah mu'akkada and emphasize sunnah. A sunnah nonetheless, and it's not fard. So now, Asr prayer has done. So why is the questioner asking it this way? Are we allowed to pray Tahiyatul Masjid after Asr Namaz? What is the issue here? What does the questioner mean? Because she means by a particular thing. What's the issue?
I think it's Hanafi fiqh. So after Asr there is no Asr and Fajr, Asr and Maghrib.
So because the issue is that scholars, based upon other hadiths, point out that the Prophet ﷺ told us there is no prayer after Asr until the sun sets, meaning until Maghrib. So on the one hand, you've got the Prophet saying, when anyone comes into the masjid, let them not sit down until they pray 2 rak'ah. 2 rak'ah of something. Even if it's 2 rak'ah sunnah of, like, you know, the next fard prayer that, you know, I had to do. Or like, let's just say in the Hanbali school, there is 2 rak'ah sunnah before the dhuhr, as opposed to 4 rak'ah sunnah. They can be 4 rak'ah, but 2 rak'ah is the norm in the Hanbali school. So I come into dhuhr, I come into the mosque for dhuhr prayers, got 10 minutes, I think, let me pray my 2 rak'ah sunnah. That will count as tahiyatul masjid. I don't have to pray 2 rak'ah separate as tahiyatul masjid, and then 2 rak'ah for the sunnah of dhuhr. I prayed 2 rak'ah of something. That's fine. Okay. Yeah, so there's one hadith that's saying when you come into the masjid, pray 2 rak'ah, and there's another hadith saying don't pray anything after Asr. So now I come into the mosque after I prayed Asr, let's say I prayed Asr in a mosque earlier, and I come into this masjid, do I pray 2 rak'ah, tahiyatul masjid, following this hadith? Or do I not pray anything following the other hadith? Okay. The vast majority of the scholars will say that the prohibition of praying after Asr takes precedence over the recommendation of praying 2 rak'ah tahiyatul masjid in this specific case. The prohibition, the haramness, is much more serious than the recommendationness. It's not haram and obligation. It's haram and recommendation. So the vast majority of scholars, including the 3 madhabs, as far as I know, the Malikis, the Hanafis and the Hanbalis, is you sit down. You've come into Asr, you prayed Asr already, you've come into a mosque for some reason, you just sit down. You don't pray. Why? Because it's haram to pray anything that isn't like an obligation upon you to pray. The Shafi'is, as far as I know, wallah, I'm not an authority on all the madhabs or whatever, but a group of the scholars will say, as long as the prayer that you're praying has a sabab, a reason to pray, then even after Asr, you can pray. So, for example, if I wanted to pray istikhara prayer, there's a reason. Istikhara has a reason behind it. Then I can pray. If I wanted to pray the 2 rak'ah that I've done tawaf, and now after I've done tawaf, I pray 2 rak'ah after I've done tawaf. I can pray that after Asr. And then they say that since we look into the Sunnah and we find 1 or 2 exceptions that you can pray some prayer at some, even after Asr, we add to that the prayer of Tahiyatul Masjid because it has a reason. But if someone wants to come in and say, I just feel like praying 2 rak'ah nafil, because it doesn't have a reason, it's just a general prayer. However, inshallah ta'ala, and Allah knows best, what is correct is no prayer should be prayed after Asr. Okay, unless it's a catch-up, a make-up prayer, a qada prayer, that's an obligation you have to do. That's different. But no recommended prayer should be prayed after Asr. Okay, question. What is the ruling on talking during khutbah? Absolutely prohibited. Even if you don't understand the khutbah, which is in many mosques, just in Arabic. Simply because the Prophet said that when the khutbah is taking place, then keep silent and don't speak. And if someone else is speaking, don't tell them to keep quiet. Because you'll be speaking. Keep quiet, but you've spoken. Okay? In this case, somehow you'd have to do an indication, an ishara, like that. And if it works, brilliant. If it doesn't, just face forward. Okay? So no. But as regards to a bayan, a talk that takes place in many mosques, like this mosque, before the actual khutbah itself, and it's a bayan, it's a talk, normally happening in the local language of the people, then you can do what you want. It would be nice if you did listen, because it's disrespectful to talk when some religious knowledge has been delivered, but it doesn't have the same status as a khutbah. Okay? You were going to say?
Is somebody reading Quran during the khutbah?
Absolutely not, because the Prophet said that when the khutbah is taking place, listen attentively and keep quiet. Not keep quiet and do your own thing and I'm on my mobile phone. Well, absolutely not. We have to listen. And even, the idea is if we can just pick up a few words in Arabic, that would be really brilliant, inshallah. Yes, my brother.
You see, like when you pray, when the khutbah is being delivered, some people pray 2 rak'ah. I see that a lot.
Yeah. Okay, so the same thing. So this comes back to issue on the one hand, listen carefully, and on the other hand, There is the hadith in Sahih Bukhari, the hadith of Sulaik al-Ghatafani, that this Sahabi, very poor Sahabi, came into the masjid on Jummah. The Prophet was given a khutbah. And the Prophet was just going to sit, and he said, Ya Sulaik, have you prayed? And he said, no. He said, pray 2 rak'ah and make them short. And then he turned to the audience and he said, when any of you enters the mosque and the Imam is delivering the khutbah, let him pray 2 rak'ahs and make them short. One group of scholars say that this was an exceptional situation for Sulaik, and they question the correctness of this hadith. They say, well, look, yes, that happened with Sulaik. We don't know about the end bit about the Prophet turning around and saying these words, but the Prophet wanted to draw people's attention to this very poor man. He had great dignity, so the Prophet didn't want to say, oh, people, he's poor, give him money, because that would have offended him. Other scholars say, no, this was a clear instruction from the Prophet that when you come to the masjid, even if the khutbah is going on, you pray 2 rak'ah. So the Hanbali school and the Shafis, they take that you pray 2 rak'ah. Okay, definitely the Hanbalis do, maybe I can't remember the Shafis do. Okay, in our school, we pray 2 rak'ah because of the hadith of Sulaik. In the Hanafis and the Malikis, they simply say, look, that must have been a particular case, because look, what's the point in the Prophet? This is how they reason, okay? And just to show the fiqh, with the Hanbalis, the hadith is there, Sulaik, clear. And as far as they're concerned, hadith is sahih. But the Hanafis and the Malikis, they say, look, the Prophet, we got quite a few hadiths where it says, don't speak during the khutbah, listen quite attentively. Don't even say shush to someone. Don't even say shush. I mean, how long does shush take? If we're not allowed to say shh, because that will be, and the Prophet said, because that will be like speaking. And shush takes what? 1.5 seconds? A quarter of a second to do? How would the Prophet, and we're not allowed to do that because it would distract us from the message of the khutbah. How would a 2-minute or 3-minute prayer be allowed? Where you wouldn't hear anything of the khutbah for 2 or 3 minutes because you'd be praying. That's how they reason out. Which is why we need to understand fiqh, and as I've said so many times, we just follow one school and we're done with it. So alhamdulillah, I don't have to, you know, the Hanafis, the Malikis, they have their proofs, the Hanbalis have their proofs. So I pray, and many others don't. And there should be no, oh, I'm a better follower of the Sunnah, and I'm, no, khalas. Because there's 2 ways of looking at it, inshallah. What we try not to do is bounce around like a table tennis ball, like a tennis ball. We listen to some Hanafis, yeah, we don't pray. And then we go online, we read some Hanbali things, oh yeah, we do pray. And then later on we listen to a Malik and he says we don't pray. And then later on we go and read some Shafi thing and we do pray. I mean, one day it's halal for me, one day it's haram. One day it's halal, one day it's haram. Sometimes when I feel a bit lazy and I know I should do it, no, I just follow the Hanafi. Right? No, you can't be chopping and changing religion like that. One day it's halal, one day it's haram. You can't make religion a toy like that. And so the best way to avoid making a religion a toy and a plaything is just to stick with one religious authority, one curriculum. If Allah give you the blessings to become a great scholar who can then look at the 3 or 4 different curriculums and choose the strongest proof, Bismillah. You know, if that happens 20, 30 years later, why not? Otherwise we follow one curriculum. Let's have another question on this paper, because it's still there. When performing ghusl, should women be covered? Right, okay. If I got the wrong end of this question, then forgive me. Ghusl is a full bath. Ghusl is a full bath in which every part of the body needs to be, water needs to reach every part of the body. Unlike wudu, ablution, where water only has to reach specific parts of the body. In ghusl, which normally we do after husband and wife have been together, for example, or after a wet dream of a man or woman has a wet dream, then a ghusl is an obligation. Without that, we can't be in a state of tahara, purification, to pray or to read the Quran or to to go around the tawaf or something like this. And in order for the body to be fully wet, you can't be wearing clothes. Therefore, one shouldn't be covered in that sense. But if it means that it is not from the modesty of a Muslim man or woman to just be openly there without any clothes in a very free way, and even when there isn't any clothes on, there should be a shyness. Even when alone, there should be still a shyness. Then yes, this is the higher etiquette, not an obligation. Not an obligation. This is the higher etiquette of a Muslim, because in some hadiths we learn, the Prophet said, but Allah sees. But Allah sees. Okay. So if a man or a woman had that level of ihsan and consciousness of Allah, then it would be quite natural and understandable and good for them to crouch down and not be so free. But they would still have to be uncovered, because the water has to reach every part of the skin. It has to be wet. Okay? And therefore the second follow-up question, should ghusl, this full bath, be performed standing or sitting? It's halal, jaiz, permissible for a person, man or woman, to take a full bath, ghusl, standing, providing his or her aura or nakedness is not seen by anyone who it can't be seen by, normally husband or wife. It's permissible, jaiz. But if they crouched and concealed, then there is a precedence in the sunnah to do that. And that would be considered to be awla, more preferable. Okay? So it's all to do with how do I maintain even my shyness in that situation. Okay? But that level of shyness is not an obligation in that situation, but it is something that we do try to work towards all around, and Allah knows best. Okay, so that's the pink questions done. Any final questions, inshallah?
Questions. Just learn something. Oxford University, I think today or yesterday they appointed a vice chancellor, who's a woman, 800 years of history. And they telling the Muslims that we discriminate women.
MashaAllah.
It's Oxford University, high level of education. Yesterday or today they appointed a woman to be a vice chancellor.
That's one of the great bundle of contradictions that we find. We're being told, treat our women well, Islam doesn't treat women well. Well, actually, Western liberal society is not a paragon of virtue of how to treat women. We shouldn't be this, and yet actually the ones telling us are nowhere near that. However, that should not be an excuse not to do what is right. Well, they don't do it. Why should I? No, we have our own standards. The Prophet said, "Istawsu bin-nisa'i khayra," treat women well, okay, and all of those things. That's the dignity. This is the message that I'm trying to say. Because we've left that beauty of the Sunnah, and we actually think that actually the Sunnah only applies in a few parts of our life, and maybe in the mosque and whatever, but outside in our business, in our lives, in our marriages, in our relationships, it's not there. Then this is what we get. Us. And all us can do, all we can do is talk about how fantastic the people of the past were. That's our Islam, to tell non-Muslims how brilliant Islam was in the past. No, we should work to show to establish the beauty of Islam now, not because it will make them non-Muslims, because it will be because we're trying to impress the non-Muslims, just because we're trying to get closer to Allah. Let's make Allah the goal. And everything else will follow. It will be, yes, inshallah, non-Muslims being impressed with Islam. Brilliant, that's what we want. But our goal is Allah, though. Okay? So, read well, read intelligently, read even, especially when the aqidah, when the Muslim belief is firm, I'm kind of clear what my basic beliefs are, my basic practices, my basic adab and akhlaq. If I'm clear, then read material outside of the religion, just to see what's going on. Okay? Learn at school. Deeply. Not, oh, well, we don't do this because of... Understand the issue, even if you reject the issue. But only do that after the basics of Islam, the basic beliefs, the basic practices, the basic adab and akhlaq, morals and ethics are firmly implanted in us, so that we won't be led astray. This, my brother.
Can you consider Shiites to be Muslims?
Absolutely. Listen to this question carefully, and we'll make this the last question. Barakallahu feekum for it. Can we consider Shia Muslims?
Can I just add one thing? Can we allow to pray, or can we pray behind any Shia?
Okay, so let me deal with the first part, and just for today, I'm going to only leave it to the first part. Other than just to say that Muslims should pray behind people that are Orthodox Muslims, that have the right beliefs concerning the Sunnah of the Prophet and the Sahaba. That's what I'd say for now. But let's go to the question about Shia. It's particularly relevant now, just now, and it always is, but just now, as you know, Yemen, not a very rich country, at the bottom of a larger rich country, Saudi Arabia. Yemen, in its political problems, had some of the people of Yemen who are Shia, Zaydi Shias, Houthis. They ousted the former president. But so much of the rest of Yemen don't accept that their former president has gone, and there is apparently a new president. And some people are thinking, well, those Shias are being backed by Iran, which is a Shia, majority Shia state, and the Saudis with a few other, Jordan and Egypt, or Jordan and a few other countries, as Sunnis have got together to try to re-establish the former president in his place, and there's killings going on. And so it's relevant in that context as well. First and foremost, bil jumla, as a rule of thumb, anyone who says La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah and then doesn't believe or do anything that nullifies that, such as worshipping others besides Allah. Anyone who says La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah is a Muslim. And we assume that they continue to be on Islam until there is as clear-cut evidence that they're not Muslim. Otherwise we assume they are Muslims. But the Prophet told us that this ummah, the Muslim nation, will split up into various sects, firqas. All of them will be misguided, apart from the one. And when he was asked what is that one, he said, Ma ana alayhi wa ashabi, that which I and my companions belong, or that which I and my companions are upon. He described the others as being Muslims from the Ummah, but being misguided. So from the mainstream, majoritarian, Sunni or Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah view, Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, those who follow the Sunnah of the Prophet and the Jama'ah, meaning the Sahaba, and those who came after them, and also Jama'ah also means the political authority, that someone is a leader and therefore you accept and you don't rebel against him. But the Jama'ah has at its head the Sahaba. So the way of the Prophet and the Sahaba, just like the Prophet said, Alaykum bi sunnati wa sunnati al-khulafa'i ar-rashidin al-mahdiyyin, follow my sunnah and the sunnah of the rightly guided caliphs, and Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, the Sahaba. From that point of view, Shias are in general, are Muslims, people of La ilaha illallah, but they are deviant Muslims. And because Shias aren't all one uniform people, they have different levels of deviation. Leave politics out of this, just as beliefs, aqidah, just as aqidah. Therefore, and the closest to the Sunnah and Jama'ah historically are known to be Zaydis. Okay? The Zaydi beliefs, which is a very small part of Shiaism, mainstream Shiaism is what is practiced in Iran, or what used to be practiced in Iran. Therefore, all we need to know is we need to make sure we do not kill other Muslims, whether they're rightly guided or misguided. All we need to know is we should not be part and parcel, as best as we can, of causing anybody to raise their hand against another Muslim, even if that Muslim is misguided. If that misguidance is having some social problems, then we expect the state and the scholars to deal with it through words or through state restrictions, not civil war, warfare and shedding blood. Because it's haram to shed the blood of a Muslim, even if it's a misguided Muslim. In this country, we should politically and socially not make a big deal about the Sunni-Shia divide so that we start fighting and physically harming each other. But we should make a strong enough distinction that the path of the Prophet and the Sahaba, mainstream Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, Sunni Islam is the correct Islam, and Shi'i Islam is misguided to whatever various levels of misguidance. At least we should be clear there. It doesn't have to be hammered in every khutbah, in every occasion. Just to know the way of the Prophet and the companions is the right way. Otherwise, bloodshed between Muslims must be avoided at all costs. Yes.
You see, some Shias, they believe that Allah makes mistakes.
So, Barakallahu feekum. So, yeah. So the question is about the question is the brother is saying, but some Shias, they believe certain horrendous things about Ali, that he is divine, he is deity, he is God. They lie. Listen to it carefully. In general, Shias have said La ilaha illallah, therefore they're Muslims. 400, 500 years ago, 700 years ago, 800 years ago, let's say, there would have been Mu'tazilites, misguided Muslims, who would also have said La ilaha illallah. They would be Muslims. That's all we concern ourselves with. We know, however, that in the books of the Shias and in real life, there are individual Shias in large numbers or small numbers. We don't know, because we don't have the ability to count, but it's in some of their books, especially mainstream Shiaism, which is the Ithna Ashariya Shiaism, the Rafida Shiaism, which is in Iran. During the time of Khomeini, Ayatollah Khomeini, okay, so-called Ayatollah Khomeini, this was the kind of stuff that he clung to, the classical Shiaism. In classical Shia beliefs, there are some beliefs in Shia Islam which would take a person outside of the fold of Islam, no doubt at all. Our job isn't to interrogate every Shia. Our job is to make sure we do not contribute to sectarian Muslim violence. And at the same time, our obligation is to learn our deen and creed properly and propagate that to others. And where there is misguidance being propagated of any form or fashion, then we should wisely, courageously, with sound knowledge and a good way, correct that misguidance in the best way we can. But to make a big issue about it and to generalize, there are some Shias who are ignorant of their Shiism as there are Sunnis ignorant of their Sunnism. There are a few Shias who are committed to their Shiism as there are a few Sunnis who are really committed to their Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ism. We just need to make sure that bloodshed doesn't occur. If someone starts on us, we learned this from Ali radiallahu anhu himself, with the first misguided Muslim sect, the Khawarij. They could insult them, do whatever, but we don't respond with the like. If they came to harm physically the people or cause disturbance, the state would stop them and restrain them somehow without violence occurring as much as possible. Sometimes violence breaks out, but we need to look at the ways of dampening it. Therefore, don't think of Yemen only in Sunni Shia terms. Even if that's the obvious thing that comes about. There's more to it. And Muslim lives, Sunni of them, or Shias of them in particular, or just Yemen just being bombed, right? SubhanAllah. When Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal was being persecuted by a misguided Muslim state, who are Mu'tazilites, and they believed in something about the Quran which is kufr sari, which was clear-cut disbelief. Imam Ahmad, when he was asked, shall we not raise the sword against them? He said, no. Avoid bloodshed, avoid bloodshed. What you have to do is just speak the truth. What you just have to do is clarify the misguidance. What you have to do is battle the falsehood through teachings. Not raise the sword against them. Why? Because once violence comes between Muslims, sectarian violence, it takes one day to start. It will take 10 years, 20 years to clear. And in this type of world, the enemies of Islam won't just sit there and think, oh, we'll let them sort it out. They'll come in strategically and do what they do. So by the time the violence is over, we'll find that actually we're not in control of anything in the world. Neither Shia Islam or Sunni Islam. It's someone who's going to be actually mocking God directly. So we need to be careful of that. And unfortunately, this takes a lot of patience, a lot of depth of understanding. Okay, but because we don't have that depth of the patience, this is what we are. We are just people who fight just like that. Okay, just like that. We're people who are ready to fight and kill. We're not people who are ready to be patient because we've got 101 reasons. And none of us have actually looked into the religious text, the actual hadith, to see what is the advice of the Prophet and the Sahaba in these matters, and we have clear advice in these matters. So be sure, I'm not preaching Shi'ism at all. You know this from me. But there's a difference between holding something to be misguided, dar, and declaring someone to be a kafir. People of La ilaha illallah, whether they have misguided views or not, but as long as their misguidance doesn't reach the level of kufr, then they're Muslims. And we accept the good from them, and we don't accept the bad from them. We accept the good from them, and we try to correct the misguidance they have if and when we can. If their misguidance reaches the level of kufr, their bid'ah becomes mukaffara, their innovation becomes kufr, and the proof is established, iqamatul hujjah, and unfortunately they will leave the fold of Islam as an individual. But that's not our intent. Our intent is to keep as many people in Islam, even as misguided. Why? Because listen to this carefully. Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, when I read this years ago, I was just shocked. And it's so obvious, but it's just so shocking to hear it. Ibn Taymiyyah says, ultimately, every person of La ilaha illallah, who in this world we speak against because of their misguidance, and we fight against their innovation. But if they die upon Islam, even a misguided version of Islam, in the end, if they go to hell and get purified, but in the end, anyone with La ilaha illallah will ultimately end up in Jannah. And I was like, right, because when I was young, I was quite, and I came into Islam during 1978, 1979, became aware because Afghanistan happened, Russians and Afghanistan happened in 78, 79, and the Iranian Revolution, right? So that was globally a trigger for many people of my generation. All right, so we were quite hot against the Shias. And then when I read this, I was like, wow. Every person of La ilaha will ultimately, but on this earth you have a duty not to allow deviation and innovation to spread. He's like, oh, well, so they're Muslims. So Allah knows best. And as regards to Muslim killing Muslim, our general rule is let people who know best sort it out, but our heartfelt du'as is may Allah stop the bloodshed happening between any type of Muslims. Okay, let them settle it round the round table, have a game of football, and the one who loses, whatever it be, but not killing. Because in modern warfare, it's not just the combatants that die. Most civilians just die. And if our hearts haven't been hardened to death because of all the trash movies we watch and the trash TV we watch, then just the blood of any one of the people of Qibla one of the people of La ilaha illallah should mean something to us, even if we bitterly disagree with their deviant beliefs. So let's end it there, inshallah. That's more important. And the reason why it's more important is because the shabab, not just the shabab, but more so the Muslim youth need to hear this message. This is not a message of compromise, this is a message of understanding what the Sharia and the Aqeedah of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah says. Sit down with the really seasoned ulama and ask them, not, oh, what are the proofs of Shias being deviant, but now that we know that they're deviant, now that we know the Khawarij are deviant, now we know that the Murji are deviant, now that we know the Mu'tazila are deviant, now that we know that the Qadiri are deviant, now that we know that all of these Firqadara are deviant, what is the way to deal with them in a social political situation? How do we explain Imam Ahmad not allowing the sword to be lifted against a government, Al-Muqtasim, who clearly said Quran is created, and that is blasphemy, that's kufr, sorry. And yet he didn't allow. And he was being flogged by the same caliph at the same time. And he didn't allow. Why? Because once civil war breaks out, subhanAllah, and the Yemen have had too much civil war, north and south, or whatever used to be the north and south. And people have played politics with many of our countries, Afghanistan being the worst and the longest of those examples. And it's okay for you and I to sit here and spout all this strong Aqeedah rhetoric because it's not your parents or my children that are going to die by bombs. Okay? It makes a big difference when you're there. This is why I strongly believe, let those called for war, whose children or themselves have been in war, then we'll get the message that no, actually modern warfare is not like 700 people being killed in the battles of the Prophet for 23 years. All those battles that happened in 13 years in Medina, the battle of Uhud and the battle. How many people were killed? Apparently 1,400 non-Muslims and about 700 Muslims, roughly. 2,000 people in 13 years of 28 battles. 2,000. Okay. In the Yemen alone, just this year, in 4 months, I wonder how many. In Iraq and Syria alone, in 1 year, 2015, thousands of times more. Okay. So it does make a big difference, inshallah. Let politics be done, not by the Shabab, but by the wise senior scholars. At least in principle. And then the politics is politics, and we ask Allah to save us from that. Let's stop there, inshallah. Enough rambling from me, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us tawfiq. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Allahumma alif bayna qulubina wa asli dhata baynina wa jannah min ar-rajili man rajab. Keep our hearts united. May He bring brotherhood in us and make us rightly guided. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us to live our lives upon Islam and the Sunnah, and let us not die except upon Islam and the Sunnah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put into our hearts a love and honour for the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whom he described with khayriyya, khayr al-nasi qarni, the best of mankind is my generation. At the head of them is Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu, followed by Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu anhu, followed by Sayyidina Uthman radiyallahu anhu, followed by Sayyidina Ali radiyallahu anhu, and then all of the Sahabas who follow. All of them are Ahlul Jannah bila shak, all of them the people of paradise. Nevertheless, in politics, in society, we need to be careful as Muslims not to be part and parcel, and not to be a cause of any Muslim fighting another Muslim in a civil war, even if those Muslims are misguided and things that are out of our control. We ask Allah, make dua to Him that He brings down some kind of sakinah. Those of you who are in Pakistan, you need to learn that lesson. It is a disgraceful tragedy that a country in modern times, the 20th century, 1947-48, that all that bloodshed that occurred and all that division that occurred for some ideal, and you still can't accept people because they're muhajirun, or because they're from the northwest frontier, because of some tribal divisions. This is not a la'na that has come to Pakistan from outside, from the kuffar. This is a la'na, a curse that has come to Pakistan because of their disobedience. Okay, and unless we understand that misguidance is one thing, but killing another Muslim is something else. And we can't make that distinction. It's one and the same. We're always going to be misguided ourselves. Make the distinction. This is misguidance. I cannot accept it, I cannot follow it, and where I can, I will speak against it. But killing another Muslim is entirely something else. Which is why the Prophet said, when in a civil war, and there's not one hadith, not two hadith, not three hadith, not four hadith, but just in Sahih Muslim alone, there might be about 15 hadith under one chapter, let alone all the other hadiths on the same subject, that when in civil war, that's a Muslim against another Muslim, and so one is going to be right, one is going to be wrong, one is going to be more right, one is going to be more wrong, or they might be both extremely wrong. They may be both extremely right, it could be a mixture, but when in a civil war, the Prophet said that break your bow string, and go and get your sword, take it out of its thing, and blunt it against a rock, and then go into the depth of your house, and just stay there. And they said, but Ya Rasulullah, suppose they break into our house, and they draw the sword over you. Then he said, be patient for Allah, and put your head down, and just accept whatever the glimmer of the blade of the sword will give you, which is death. Why? Better that than killing another Muslim. What politics do we want when the Prophet has spoken not once, not twice, not thrice, tens of times on these things? What do the people of Pakistan, what more guidance do they want? What do the people of Syria, what more guidance do they want? And it's worse when you have outside interference by our country, by Western forces and their various agendas. But just ourselves, if everything was removed, why are we killing each other? And this is a person who's been committed to establishing the way of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah since I was, since the mid-80s, whether how much I understood it in the mid-80s or not. But this is because I'm coming from mainstream Islam, and I'm telling you, mainstream Islam doesn't like this violence. And don't be confused by a scholar or a sheikh being really clear that, you know what, the Shia misguided there, blah, 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 and to take that to mean that he wants you to go out and fight and kill them. And no good telling me that, oh yeah, but in Pakistan or in India, oh, you don't know what the Shias do. I have a fair idea. At least of all because I have friends that have actually been killed in Sunni Shia riots in the subcontinent. But it's not emotion. We're supposed to be guided by the book and the Sunnah and the understanding of the Jama'ah, the Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So please, learn the Deen, learn the Sunnah and the Jama'ah, and we need to stop this violence. We really need to somehow stop it. Okay? If anyone wants you to take sides in a civil war between Muslims, just say, you know what, let it all cool down and we'll sort it out. If you don't do that, you have moved away from the majority position of the Sahaba. The vast majority of the Sahaba did not enter into a fitna of civil war. The vast majority of them didn't, because the hadiths are too clear. They just waited to who ends up, who is the one standing and who's the one knocked down on the canvas. The one standing, he's the champion, he's our ruler, misguided or not. Because it's better than bloodshed. Any other thing is haram politics. It's najasa politics, it's stinky, dirty politics. And it's not anything to do with the deen. Either deen is complete, then learn politics of the deen. But don't come and tell me the deen is complete, and you have no idea what the book and the sunnah are saying in siyasa, and you're speaking politics, a'udhu billah. You're speaking politics because people are dying. People are dying. And most of those people are women and children. And then they don't have drinking water for the next 10 years. And then the British and the American and the French infrastructure workers come and say, we will rebuild. And they do. But they rebuild with conditions. And the glory of God diminishes in the heart and in the land. And what I've said here is the opinion of me. It's nothing to do with the opinion of the masjid. The masjid has no connection with this opinion. Allah Jalla wa Ala knows best. But too many of you, you're too interested in dunya. And too many of the elders, they corrupt young people's minds. How many young persons said, I used to hear my father, my uncle curse when he reads the news, the newspaper, blah, 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 and then I used to get riled up by that. You're misguiding the youth. You elders, you're misguiding the youth in your dirty, misguided politics that you bring from here, Repent to Allah. Make tawbah to Allah. Repent to Allah of your wicked ways. Repent to Allah and ask Allah to wash the blood off your hands. Because any word that leads to the bloodshed of Muslims, then there is blood on your hands. Subhanallah. Yes, it is an unjust world. It is an unjust world. And justice is quite often trodden over with dhulm. But we still have rules to follow. We still have rules to follow, my brothers, my elders, sisters. May Allah Jalla wa Ala give us tawfiq. May Allah Jalla wa Ala give us some kind of aman, peace and security in the majority Muslim land. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us that level of peace so that we can begin to announce the glory of God and the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the manhaj of the Sahaba. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.